Assalamu'alaikum Warahmatullahi Wabarakatuh. Hello guys, my name is Alfian Lestari. Also, you can call me Mr. Alfian. Today, we will learn about fungi. Before we start our lesson, let's pray together. Finish. First of all, I hope no one absent today because this is a class online, and I hope you are in the good condition every day. Okay, we will start discuss about fungi, and I hope you are able to make some classification and identification on fungi based on your group discussion. Also, you will be able to make an interactive report based on your identification. Okay, before we start, I have a question to you. What do you think of when you hear the word fungi? And as you can see, what happened with this word? Write down your answer in the comment section below. Next, fungi is a plural from fungus. This is a kind of organism, example yeast, mold, and mushroom, that exist in the single filamentous or multicellular body. Fungi are neither animal nor plant. They are also not bacteria or protists. Did you still remember our lesson yesterday? We learned about protists, and this is video they explain of the difference of mushroom and protists. You can see in this video.
Turns out amoebas are easy to draw, and we are sisters, so our channel name seemed practical, kind of. Now, we don't really resemble real-life amoebas with our eyes, stars on our heads. None of these things are very amoeba-like. If you'd like to see some real-life amoeba footage, we have a great channel recommendation in the video details. Part of it is that we happen to really love amoebas and other protists. It just turns out that sometimes people forget about protists. I mean, they're not exactly easy to see. Most protists are microscopic. Most are unicellular, which means they're made up of one cell, although there are some multicellular protists. Protists are eukaryotes, which means that unlike prokaryotes, they do have a nucleus and other membrane-bound organelles. Many protists can move, and so if you're curious about how they do their locomotion, they might have flagella or cilia, or in our case as an amoeba, they might move around by extending their pseudopods. Some protist cells are animal-like, where they won't typically have cell walls, while others are plant or fungus-like, where you will see a cell wall. Protists are such a diverse group because it's a category many organisms are put into when they don't quite meet the requirements for a plant, animal, or fungus. If you wanted to find a protist, where would you look? Well, that really depends on what kind of protist you are looking for. Protists can be found in the water, both saltwater and freshwater, in the soil, or in other animals, just some examples. If you are trying to find a protist, you would likely want to consider what it eats. Protists can be autotrophs or heterotrophs. Recall that autotrophs make their own food, and in the case of protists, it's common to see photosynthetic autotrophs. This can include diatoms and euglena as some example autotrophs. Although euglena is tricky because euglena can actually act as a heterotroph too. Heterotroph protists eat other things, so amoebas are one. So are paramecia and slime molds. That's a confusing type because many times when you see the word mold, you think of fungi, which we'll get to later. But slime molds are protist. Protist reproduction is actually very complex, and we'd need another video to cover it. Some do binary fission, a simple asexual process of just splitting that we talked about in our bacteria video. But many do sexual reproduction too. Some protist life cycles include lengthy haploid and diploid stages, especially in some of the parasitic types of protists. So again, another video. So you may wonder, how does a protist really affect me? Well, protists do a lot of good in the world. Photosynthetic protists in aquatic environments act as important producers, producing oxygen and also being a part of the food chain. Many types of protists, like the fascinating slime molds, are decomposers. Many organisms have relationships with protists that they depend on. Examples? Many coral species depend on certain types of protists to fix carbon for them. Some types of insects require protists in their gut to help them digest certain types of plant matter. But there are some problematic protists. One example for humans is that they can cause disease. Many people think mosquitoes are the sole cause of malaria, which is a potentially deadly disease. But actually, mosquitoes are a carrier for the disease, because malaria is actually caused by a type of parasitic protist that lives in a specific type of mosquito's gut and can reproduce in the human body. By working on mosquito control in areas where malaria is found, it can help prevent the protist from spreading. Also, there are medications for malaria that can keep the protist from being able to reproduce in the human body. We should point out there are also dangerous types of amoeba. Most amoeba species are harmless to humans, but there is a species of amoeba that can be lethal to humans if it is able to enter the human body. While cases of this infection are very rare, it has a high mortality rate. It's important that research continues to look for ways to treat it. And the Irish potato famine in the 1800s, which caused so much destruction of potato crops, was caused by a type of protist that resembles a fungus, but is actually a protist. Learn more about this in the video details. So, we covered a lot about protists now. What about fungi? They're far more fun than one may realize. Overdone, perhaps. Fungi, like protists, are also eukaryotes. Most fungi have cell walls made of carbohydrate called chitin. You can also find chitin as part of the exoskeleton of insects. Kinda cool. So if you were looking for fungi, where would you look? Many people automatically think of areas that are dark with moisture, which sure, you can find fungi there, but you can actually find fungi in all kinds of places. In the soil, in your house, in aquatic environments, on you. When you see fungi, they might remind you of something like a plant, but if considering molecular genetics, fungi are actually more related to animals than they are plants. Fungi don't require light for photosynthesis like plants do, because fungi don't do photosynthesis. Unlike the classification of protists, which, as we mentioned, can include autotrophs, fungi are heterotrophs and therefore consume organic matter. Most fungi are multicellular, but there are unicellular fungi too. Many types of fungi can do both sexual and asexual reproduction. Both of these forms of reproduction often involve the use of spores. Think way smaller than plant seeds. And these can be spread far away from the parent fungus by wind or by animals or another method. Like the protists, fungi reproduction can be very complex, and we'd need another video to cover it. When people think of fungi, they often think of something gross or not good. Now, it is true that fungi can be problematic. For example, yeast infections, ringworm, thrush, athlete's foot, these are all examples of fungal infections that can affect humans. Fungi can also be parasites of many organisms, like this nematode. Although many species of nematodes are also parasitic too, so sometimes it's a parasite on a parasite. Fungi can also attack plants and therefore cause destruction to crops. But fungi do a lot of good. They are excellent decomposers, which is very important for ecosystems. Many types of fungi make up food sources for other organisms. Many fungi are involved in some of the foods humans eat, like producing some types of cheese or helping bread rise by using yeast. Yeast is a fungus. Or mushrooms. Mushrooms themselves are a fungus. Many types of fungi have symbiotic mutual relationships with other organisms. For example, fungi can help increase the surface area of plant roots for so many species of plants and help the plant access more water and minerals. And in return, the fungus gets some products of the plant's photosynthesis. Or there's lichen, which is a symbiotic relationship of a fungus and typically an algae. We mentioned lichen in our ecological succession video, where you can see its role as a pioneer species. And lichen is also a food and habitat source for other organisms. In medicine, we should mention that many antibiotics are derived from fungus. In fact, the first antibiotic, penicillin, was accidentally discovered from a mold, a fungus. So overall, fungi and protists continue to fascinate us, and scientists still learn more about them all the time. Did you know there's been research on the potential use of phytoplankton as a source of biofuel? Or that some types of fungi are used as biocontrol agents against pest insects as an alternative to chemical pesticides? Or that yeast have roles in biotechnology, like recombinant DNA technology? You can learn more about these from some further reading suggestions in the video details. Maybe one day you will be part of discovering more about what these amazing and sometimes overlooked organisms can do.
Okay, now you know about fungal characteristic based on the video that you watch. The general characteristic of the fungi is a eukaryotic, multicellular, and heterotrophic, or it means they are also a nutrient from a dead organism. And the specific characteristic is the cell wall of the fungi made from chitin or polysaccharide. Also, they can produce a powerful enzyme. The name is mycotoxin. And another characteristic from fungi is a vegetative body consists of mycelia or mycelium that made up of network of hypha. Okay, now you know about the characteristic of fungi. Next, we will discuss about the classification of fungi. Classification of fungi is based on life cycle, especially the reproductive structure. Fungi can reproduce both sexually or asexually by means of spores. There are three major of phyla fungi. They are classified by the sexual reproduction. These are the conjugation fungi or zygomycota. The second one is the subfungi or ascomycota. Third is the bulb fungi or basidiomycota. And the last is the imperfect fungi called the deuteromycota. Okay, next, conjugation fungi or zygomycota. They are mostly terrestrial and they have a root-like hypha. The function of the root is called rhizoid. The function, this is a anchored fungus, secrete the digestive enzyme and absorb nutrients from the dead organism. And the other hypha is called stolon. They are grown in a network over the surface of the food, give rise to sporangiovore, which are the reproductive hypha. And usually, zygomycota reproduce asexually by spores. Okay. For the brief explain, let's watch the video about zygomycota and the example of this class.
Also known as the conjugating fungi. Now, the Zygomycota are just one of the 5 major phyla that make up the kingdom fungi. And actually, you might already know the most common member of this phylum. It is the bread mold, also known as Rhizopus stolonifera, which will grow on the surface of bread, fruit, and vegetables. I brought home some strawberries last week and I left a few out on the counter for a few days, and as usual, you'll notice that, or I decided to notice that some of these strawberries started to grow some white fuzzy stuff. This is the Rhizopus fungi, and it will, what it does, it actually feeds on the surface of these strawberries. This is a before and an after picture. And I also did the same experiment using some bread. So I left a slice of white bread on the counter, and over time it started growing these dark patches as well as this white sort of fuzzy stuff. These white fuzzy stuff are the fungi that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. So in the next few slides, I'm going to first introduce some general concepts that separate these fungi in the phylum of Zygomycota, and then I'm going to go into the phases of these asexual reproduction followed by sexual reproduction. Okay, so let's begin by giving some terms. Now, most of the members that fall into this phylum of Zygomycota are going to be called saprobes. You might also hear the term saprophytic. That means that they will live off decaying organic matter. So as you can see here, this bread mold is considered a dead organic matter. These molds are going to grow on it and extract its nutrients. Very few of them are actually associated with any pathogenic infections with humans and animals. In fact, that common member, the Rhizopus stolonifera, it is considered an opportunistic human pathogen, but rarely does cause any disease. So for the most part, you don't have to worry about that mold growing on your bread. All members of the Zygomycota have coenocytic hyphae with haploid nuclei. So I'm showing you two pictures, one of coenocytic hyphae on the top and on the bottom a septated hyphae. So what it means by being coenocytic is that they do not have septum that separate their individual cells. So they'll have these long strands of hyphae with just various organelles and nuclei floating, from one branch to the other. Also, their nuclei, as mentioned, are haploid. That means that they only have one copy of every chromosome inside their nucleus. That differs from our chromosomes, or our nucleus, because our nucleus are diploid, meaning that we have two copies of every single chromosome. Now, how do they reproduce? They can do that by two ways. They can reproduce asexually, as shown here, or by sexual reproduction. So usually they reproduce asexually when they have tons of nutrients and the environmental conditions are good for them to grow. So they're going to reproduce by forming this very special hyphae called a sporangiophore. The sporangiophore will form a sac-like structure called the sporangium, and inside that sac will be hundreds of sporangiospores. These sporangiospores are held up in the air so that in any air current that can go by, when that sporangium ruptures, those spores will be able to be carried through the wind current and land on other suitable growing environments. So that's what happens normally during good growth conditions. However, when those conditions are not as favorable, so let's say they don't have enough nutrients or the temperature is not in the right range for growth, these two hyphae of two opposing mating strains will come together close enough so that they can fuse together and conjugate, hence the name conjugating fungi. And they're going to form a zygosporangia. So I'm showing you a picture of a zygosporangia here. It's sort of a thick-walled structure that forms between these two hyphae of opposing mating strains, and inside will be the zygospores. Okay, now these zygosporangia are important to the species because they can withstand those less favorable conditions, allowing the fungi to go under dormancy until conditions do improve, until more nutrients come in their environment where they can undergo meiosis inside that zygosporangia, form those haploid zygospores. Those zygospores can then germinate and form more fungi. Okay, so we'll go into that in 1 second. Okay, so I want to first go step by step and talk to you about the asexual reproduction. So I'm bringing back a slice of bread here, and I'm showing you that there are these hyphae, we call them vegetative hyphae, that are buried inside the slice of bread. They're going to secrete some enzymes that allow the starch to be broken up so it can absorb that glucose. It's going to take in the nutrients and make these aerial hyphae, which they will have the sporangium, or rather the sporangiophore, that will then grow the sporangiospores. And I'm showing you the sporangium with the sporangiospores here in these dark circles, and I'm peppering some of these little spores that became released. Okay, so we're going to start with this sporangiospore, and we're going to follow it through its asexual reproduction. So let's say the wind took the sporangiospore and it's landed on another slice of bread. Now that slice of bread is going to have plenty of nutrients so that this sporangiospore can then begin to germinate and form a coenocytic hyphae as shown here. That coenocytic hyphae will continue to grow, it will branch, it will form specialized rhizoid hyphae. These are the hyphae that bury inside the bread to acquire nutrients. It will also make a network of aerial hyphae, the sporangiophore, in which a sporangium that is filled with sporangiospores will then form.
Okay, next. Assalamu'alaikum Wr or the sap fungi. This is the largest group of the fungi. All are the multicellular with the exception of yeast. Yeast is the example organism from Assalamu'alaikum group. Okay, the general characteristic of the Assalamu'alaikum is Hiva have a septa. And Assalamu'alaikum or sap fungi have a progress two kind of spores. Sexual spore called ascospore and asexual spore called a conidia. Ascospore develop within a sac-like ascus. As you know, some member of this group cause a plant disease. Okay, for the matter explained, we can see the video below.
The majority of known fungi are grouped within this phylum. 3 examples are the Peziza, the Penicillium, and Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Peziza has a large multicellular fruiting body. It's saprophytic and it grows on the ground and on rotting wood. Whereas Penicillium is often found growing on the rind of a citrus fruit. It's also multicellular, but it's more of a mold-like features. Its importance is in its ability to produce the antibiotic known as penicillin. Saccharomyces cerevisiae, unlike the other two, is a single-cell yeast, which is often used in the production of beer, wine, bread.
Okay, next, this is a Basidiomycota, or the club fungi. The group is about 25,000 described, including mushroom, toad, tools, puffball, rust, and smokes. The member of Basidiomycota is important decomposed of wood because their ability to hydrolyze lignin. Basidiomycota have a sexual reproduction that produce basidiospore, which are produce the fruiting body or club of the fungus. And many types of these fungi are edible, but many are also extremely poisonous. Since the different species are harvested in the different time, this one mushroom can be harvested throughout the growing season. You are able to positively identify any one mushroom you find before eating it. It may be your last meal. Okay, let's see the video about the explain of the Basidiomycota.
Hi, I'm Professor Joe Bolduc, and today I'm going to talk about a specific phylum of fungi known as the Basidiomycota. Members of this phylum are typically the mushrooms, puffballs, rusts, smuts, and stinkhorns. The Basidiomycota are just one of many phylums that are comprised of the fungi. And as you can see from this slide, that the Basidiomycota phylum is closely related to that of the Ascomycota. So what makes the Basidiomycota different from all the other fungi? First of all, the majority of the members of this phylum are edible, with a few exceptions where there are some mushrooms that secrete toxins which prove to be lethal for animals and plants. Another major difference is how they grow and replicate. So let's begin with a single spore. A spore is a single cell that has one copy of every chromosome, so it's what we call haploid. Fungi use spores as a way of dispersing cells so that fungi can grow in different places so that they can seek nutrients. A Basidiomycota, using the mushroom as an example. However, this holds true for all the other members of the Basidiomycota, including the puffballs, the rusts, the smuts, and the stinkhorns. Specifically, they can replicate by sexual spores called the basidiospores, or by fragmented hyphae, which is the asexual type of spore in this case. The terms that I've told you included the term plasmogamy, which occurred in the stem of the mushroom, where two haploid of opposing mating spores fused together, generated a single cell that had 2 haploid nuclei. As the resulting hyphae resulted as it grew up into the stem and to the cap of the mushroom, a specialized hyphae formed into a basidium. The basidium was a cell that contained the 2 fused nuclei, so it has 1 nucleus that is now diploid. This diploid nuclei underwent 2 rounds of meiosis to form the basidiospores, which are back into being haploid again. I also mentioned that these fungi are multicellular and that they are made out of a network of hyphae called mycelium, and that the hyphae are septated, meaning that they are separated by a septum. And finally, these Basidiomycotum members are also called the club-like fungi because of that basidium. That basidium has a club-like structure. Lastly, what I'd like to leave with you is that I'd like to mention that many of these fungi in the Basidiomycota have a dimorphic type of lifestyle. That means that most of the time they do form these multicellular mycelium type structures, but they're occasionally, under certain environmental conditions, they can form a single cell fungi, otherwise known as yeast. Most of these dimorphic Basidiomycota are pathogenic to plants and animals, so when we find them out in the environment, they are multicellular, but when they enter their host or enter a plant or an animal, they do become single cells. And infection is very closely linked to this dimorphic type of lifestyle. So this ends the lecture on Basidiomycota. Thank you for listening.
Okay, next is a Deuteromycota, or the imperfect fungi. This organism exhibits all the characteristics of fungi, but have not been observed of reproducing sexually. And as classification is based on reproduction sexually, Deuteromycota cannot be definitely placed in any field. Deuteromycota can bring a beneficial impact or harmful impact. The beneficial impact is an example of the penicillium. Last, let's see the video about Deuteromycota.
Deuteromycetes. The Deuteromycota, Greek for second fungi, were once considered a formal phylum of the kingdom fungi. There are about 25,000 species that have been classified in the Deuteromycota. The fungi imperfecti, or imperfect fungi, also known as Deuteromycota, are fungi. Fungi producing the antibiotic penicillin, and those that cause athlete's foot and yeast infections are imperfect fungi. Some members are saprophytes or parasites, while a large number of them are decomposers of litter and help in mineral cycling. Some examples are Alternaria, Collectotrichum, and Trichoderma.
It's a general characteristic and the classification of the mushroom or fungi. And okay, next, I will show you how to make an interactive report using the Canva in the smartphone or mobile phone. And let's see. Okay, first you need to download the Canva application into the Play Store. It is for Android smartphone. Okay, if the finish is already done, open it. And login. Okay, this is so many templates to make some interactive report. You will search report and pick one of the template, something like this, and you can change the picture, the sentence, and many more. And it is very simple to add some picture, color, or another filter. Also, you can add some text, illustration, sticker, video, picture, and many more. Okay, let's try it. Okay guys, you can pause the video and write down your answer in the link on the description. There is some question that you will answer that assess your understanding about fungi. Okay, I hope you can understand the tutorial and collect the interactive report on my email in the description. And that is for me. Thanks for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.